Muy buenas noches compañeros y estimado docente. Vamos a hacer lectura de este artículo de Harvard Business Review llamado A New Approach to Contrats by David, Oliver and Kate. When they originally selected FedEx in 2005, 200 aspects of its Harvard return and repair process, the companies drew up a traditional supplier contract. The 100-page plus document was filled with supplier chart statement that detailed FedEx obligation and outlined dozens of metrics for how they would measure success. For nearly a decade, FedEx mirrored out its contractual obligations, but neither party was happy in the relationship. Dell felt that FedEx was not proactive in driving continuous improvement and innovative solutions. FedEx was frustrated by onerous requirements that was resources and forced it to operate within a restrictive statement of work. Their attempts to lower costs included bidding of the work 3 times during the 8-year relationship, ate into FedEx profits. By the 8 years, the parties were at the breaking point. Each lacked trust and confidence in the other, yet neither could afford to end the relationship. Their cost of switching to another company would be high, and FedEx would have trouble replacing the revenue and profits the contract generated. It was a lose-lose scenario. Unfortunately, this story is not unique. Companies understand that their suppliers are critical partners in lowering costs, increasing quality, and driving innovation, and leaders routinely talk about the need for a strategic relationship with shared goals and risks. But when contract negotiations begin, they default to an adversarial mindset and a traditional contracting approach. They agonize over every conceivable scenario and then try to put everything in black and white. A variety of contractual clauses, such as termination for convenience, which grants one party total freedom to end the contract after a specific period, are used to try to gain the upper hand. However, these tactics not only confer a false sense of security, because both firms' switching costs are too high to actually embark to clauses, but also foster negative behavior that undermines the relationship and the contract itself. We argue that the remedy is to adopt a totally different kind of arrangement, a formal relational contract that specifies mutual goals and establishes governance structures to keep the parties' expectations and interests aligned over the long term, designed for the outset to foster trust and collaboration. This legally enforceable contract is especially useful for highly complex relationships in which it is impossible to predict every what-if scenario. This included complicated outsourcing and purchasing arrangements, strategic alliances, joint ventures, fair cases, public-private partnerships, major construction projects, and collective bargaining agreements, and growing number of large organizations such as the Canadian government, their Inter, AstraZeneca, and the Swedish telecommunication firm Telia are successful using this approach. In this article, we look at the theoretical underpinnings of formal relational contracts and lay out a 5-step methodology for negotiating them. Okay, hold ups, incomplete contracts, and shedding. Okay. Companies have traditionally used contracts as protection against the possibility that one party will abuse its power to extract benefits at the expense of the other. For example, by unilaterally raising or lowering prices, changing delivery dates, or recurring more onerous employment terms. Economists call this the hold-up problem, the fear that one party will be held up by the other. The fact that virtually all contracts contain gaps, omissions, and ambiguities, despite the company's best efforts to anticipate every scenario, only exacerbates hold-up behavior. Leaders employ a range of tactics to try to ensure that they are not taken advantage of by a powerful partner. This including contracting with multiple suppliers, forcing suppliers to lock in prices, using termination for convenience clauses, or obligating suppliers to cover activities that might arise after the initial contracting phase. Some companies go so far as to insert the shadow organization to micromanage the supplier. Okay, early research by one of us, Oliver, who won the 2016 Nobel Prize, an economist for his work on contracts, predicted that in response to the combined problem for hubs and incomplete contracts, companies are very likely to make distorted investment that produce poor outcomes. Using multiple suppliers instead of only one, for example, increased costs, should thus operating at shadow organizations, termination for convenience clauses create perverse incentives for suppliers to not invest in buyer relationship. At 60-day termination for convenience relates to a 60-day contract. One CFO at a supplier told us, "It would be against our fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders to invest in any program for a client while at 60-day termination clauses that require longer than 2 months to generate a return." The implications for innovations are obvious. Buyers are crazy to expect us to invest in innovation if they do the math. Continued. In 2008, Oliver, together with economic theorist John Muir, revisited his work on contracts. They realized that an equally important problem associated a retarded behavior in which one party stopped cooperating, ceases to be proactive, or makes countermoves. Shading happens when a party isn't getting the outcome it expects from the deals and feeds the other party, is to blame, or has not acted reasonable to mitigate the losses. The aggrieved party often cuts back on performance and sort of waits, sometimes even unconsciously to compensate. Imagine that a supplier of engineering service submits a proposal in a competitive bidding process and wins the contract. If the demand is lower during the term of the contract than the budget set in the RFP, or the scope expands in an unanticipated area, the supplier profit will take a hit. If the buyer resorts to adjust the supplier fee or the statement of work, the supplier may try to recoup losses by, for example, replacing the expensive team it currently has on the project with its less costly C team. In the term, in long-term complex deals, shading can be so pervasive that the tit-for-tat contracts are reference point, a new perspective that enhances the need for mechanisms to continually align expectations, or that reference point as unanticipated events occur and needs change over time. A new approach. At the same time that Oliver and Moore were looking at the contracting problem from an economics perspective, University of Tennessee researchers, including two of us, Kate and David, were working with companies to come up with a new approach that would produce healthier and more sustainable partnerships. Their efforts led to the best methodology for creating formal relation contracts and process that establishes what's in it for we partnership mentality. I called I called West because the parties have a vested interest in the each other's assets, written contracts that are legally enforceable, which are why we call them formal. They include many components of a traditional contract, but also contain relationship building elements such as our shared vision, guiding principles, and robust governance structures to keep the parties' expectations and interests aligned. Relational contracts that really on parties making sure and their mutual self-interest and nothing else, of course. The benefits in informal handshake there have been studied in the promote over the decades. Legal scholar Stuart McConnell and John McNeil were, were early advocates in the 1960s. Japanese keiretsu, an arrangement in which buyers from shoes associations with an often own stake in supplier is type of relational contract. The perhaps unsurprisingly most companies and their legal counsels in particular are uncomfortable with informal handshake deals, especially when the stakes are high. In fact, many companies who believe that even the Venture Keiretsu model, which Toyota and Nissan, among others, successfully ties up capital and limits flexibility for the former relational contract addresses these deficiencies. Change happens when one party isn't getting the outcome to expect. When Dell and FedEx reach their breaking point, they choose to abandon their existing contracting process and create a formal relational contract that specifies desired outcomes and define relationship management processes at the operational management and executive levels. In the first 2 years, their FedEx were able to reduce costs by 42%, scrap by 67%, and defective parts per million to record low levels. Both companies now consider the contracting approach of best practice had applied it in other relationship. Putting into practice. Before jumping into a formal relational contract process, companies must determine where it is right for them. Some relationships, such as those involving uh, the purchase of commodity products and services, are truly transactional and only need traditional contracts, but many organizations require long-term, complex relationships for which the best methodology is well suited. Okay, a case in point in behavior is land help. Island help authority and so island hospitalists and partnerships and of administrators and doctors who work together to provide inpatient care for patients with the most complex medical history and British Columbia. The NTS decided to explore relational contracting in 2016, 2 years after their conventional contract had expired and countless hours of contentious negotiations had failed to replace it. Working with the University of Tennessee, including Kate, they embarked on the 5-step process. Step 1. Lay the foundation. The primary goal of Step 1 is the established partnership mentality. Both parties must make a conscious effort to create an environment of trust, one in which they are transparent about their high-level aspirations, speak goals, and concerns. And if their previous contract process led to distrust and a vicious cycle of cheating, they should reflect on how and why that happened. At Island Head in South Island, the parties tossed out the old contract and chartered a team of 12 administrators and 12 specialists to design a formal relational contract. Each individual worked with a counterpart for the other organization to establish connections in key areas. For example, Spencer Crabb and specialists from South Island and Kim Currant, Island here the vice president for finance, legal and risk, led a small group focus on replicate the conventional free-form billable service or payment structure. We were no longer interested in just developing and contracts. We called Jets Mascade and hospitals of South Island who co-head the contracting team, but embedded in excellent relationship and multiple levels that would allow all of us to be leaders in Canadian healthcare, whether as administrator or hospitalist. Step 2. Co-create and share vision and objectives. To keep expectations aligned in a complex and changing environment, both parties, not just to one white greater power, need to explain their vision and goals for their relationship. The Island Herd and So Island team held a 3-day off-site to craft their vision. Together, we are a team that celebrates and advances excellence in care for our patients and ourselves through shared responsibility, collaborative innovation, mutual understanding, and the courage to act in a safe and supportive environment. They further established a set of for desired outcomes that flowed from the shared visions. Excellent in patient care development develop a former robot's quality structure, and sustainable in resilient specialist service, strength recruitment, mentorship, and retention process, create an efficient and flexible specialist schedules model, and clearly define specialist service and workload, develop stronger in determinal working relationship, and train and develop current and future speakers leaders. And strong partnership continue to build a healthy relationship between Aslan head and so Aslan. Abets below hospital services, proactively manage the budgets, optimize building, review workload, and increase the operational efficiency. In subsequent workshops, the team developed deeper crafting for high-level design outcomes, 7 goals, and 22 tactical and measures objectives. One objectives, for example, care for improving physical billing to the Provincial Medical Service Plan (MSP) for cost recovery for the hospital's fees. The parties create a jobs project collaboratively working with village support and IT technologies and develop an electronic billing program to massive billing submissions, automate improving costs recovering from 87% to 100%. Step 3. Adopt guiding principles. Value eroding frictions, and shading the core because one or both parties for honesties unfairly treated. This rate is highest when there are many unknowns about what will occur after the contract is signed. In step 3, parties commit to a guiding principle that contractually prohibit opportunistic for that moves. The C's principle reciprocate autonomy, honestly, loyalty, equity, and integrity formed the basics for a contract using the best methodology and profit and framework for resolving potential misalignments when enforcement circumstances occur. Aslan and so Aslan formally embedded their interpretations at the principle in the preamble of their contracts. It was created to establish anew for the partnerships under reciprocity. For example, they highlighted the need to continue to observe in the spirit and achieves mutual benefit and understanding under equate they acknowledged the unavailable imbalance that is in the contracts. We are committed to fairness, which does not always mean equality. We will make decisions based on the balanced assessment of need, risk, and resources. Again, it's important to note that that guiding principle have date, although the control language may be bigger. Courts are obligated to interpret it should there be of the spot indeed. The Canadian Supreme Court replacing took up a case in which a Francais alleged that it was not being treated fairly by the Francais owner, and fearing lies the bureau and the formal relational contract. Few companies we want to raise an expensive court case for breaching the given principles. Thus, the contract becomes a deterrent against counterproductive behavior. Step 4. Align expectations and interest. Having set the foundation for the relationship in the first two steps, partners hammer out the terms of the deal, for example, responsibilities, pricing, and metrics. It's a crucial that are terms and conditions of the former relational contract are aligned with the guiding principles. With the right mindset, the development of the contract becomes object proven, solving exercise right there and adversarial context. Okay, consider how the Iceland Health Administrator and so Iceland Hospitals tailored pricing with hours with a staking point. Historically, the two parties and operate under the shore of opaqueness. For example, Iceland had never shared the budget with the hospitals, and so Iceland led an optional reporting process made inevitable recurring our valuable wars. King Koran of Island Hill described how the methodology worked in the impasse. We consciously approach the economics of the relationship with full transparency and a problem-solving mentality instead of the organization mentality. She told us. We put everything on the table, and we encouraged the contracting team to figure out ways to work with the money we got. The parties ultimately came up with an alternative to the standard fit for B-level horror dub. Okay, they designed a hybrid pricing model with a combination of fixed and variable rates, coupled with incentives to improve efficiency. The model also gave the hospitals autonomy the scheduling. After all, the team realized who better they optimize the scheduling for superior patient care than the doctors on the front lines. Under the new pricing models, when the inpatient population is low, the hospitals cannot to take time off and save Iceland herb money. When the population is high, they manage their hours in a way that within the budget in optimize patient care. So Iceland has the opportunity to earn incentives if they improve efficiency and billing, which they can invest in research and quality of care initiative they care passionate about. Both parties felt that the new model was a win-win solution that would have been unscalable under previous contract. Step 5. Stay aligned. In the state, contracting parties go beyond crafting the terms of the agreement and established governance mechanisms that are formally embedded in the contract. Iceland Hill and so Iceland created 4 joint governance teams carried to life into the relational contract. The relationship focus the relationship team focus on monitoring the health of the relationship. The SN team focus on the quality control, transformation initiatives, continuous improvement, and prioritization, the taking and innovation ideas. The sustainability team focused on work-life scheduling, recruiting, and retention. The best value team focus in the finance, billing, workload optimization, and operational efficiency. Each team meet a regular interval to review progress against the shared visions, goals, outcomes, and measures. The contract also specifics on second governance mechanics and to about communication approach in which an administration instilled the hospitality for each of four governance teams. The approach encouraged trust and honesty between two outsides, Ken Smith and hospitality so Iceland. Before we had no one to speak with if concert arose. How I have someone in no fairly with a high level administration. If I need to make an urgent decision or have a difficult issue that can wait for the next formal meeting, and can phone my to an about partner and ask to meet. Such pairing are also highly encouraged outside the governance terms to strengthen the relationship and build trust between parties at the levels. For example, King Caron and Gis Maskik, informal parents, both say that former relational contracting was transformational for their respective organizations. Both point surveys conducted immediately before the process began and the 1 year after the relational contract was in place. The number of people who expressed a positive attitude toward the relationship increased by 84% in just 2 years. Administrator and hospitalists who had carried their relationship broken, dysfunctional, and distrustful now described as collaborative, trusting, and supportive. Caron points to financial benefits as well. For the first time, the administration and our doctors are innovating together to drive efficiency and optimize for patient care with our limited budget. She said, we not only come in under budget, we also decrease it for revenue by improving the MSP billing process. In a publicity-funded healthcare environment, that is exactly what we need to be focusing on. The governance structure also helps the parties surmount the tricky problem of scope creep. Why the contract was being developed 2016 and 2017. Canada paid allowed legalized medical assistance denied. At the time, there were too many arguments about how it would be imprisonment to address the issue formally. So the sustainability think came out which appeared project at address how the fairly at the additional scope of work and new role for healthcare providers to the hospitals, schedules and pricing models. Gone were the battles of noise scope. Instead, there was a spirit of how can we accommodate this new reality giving our statement of intent. Okay, the future contracting for competitive advantage. Formal relational contracts. We never completely replace traditional contracts. Nor should they. But the process we have outlined should be parts of the contracting to guide the covered highly complex relationships that demand collaboration and flexibility. Glenn Gallins, the attorney representing So Island Hospitals and a law professor, at the University of Victoria after the following advice when it comes to embracing formal relational contracts. The focus on negotiations, the foundations of the relationship first is brilliant, sorry, but the real power it is threats at the way down to core decisions on how the price will work. In a business where strategy long-term relationships are critical to competitive advantage, leaders have no choice but to the turns. Ok, bueno, este documento en sí habla de lo que es como un nuevo enfoque para los contratos, a new approach, donde varias empresas, bueno, donde se mira desde varios puntos lo que son las relaciones de las empresas con respecto a la innovación y a lo que son las necesidades de relaciones estratégicas con los objetivos o los riesgos compartidos. Esto quiere decir de que la empresa realmente está en completo, o sea, siempre va a haber como una contrapartida en lo que es la innovación y lo que es mantener, ¿cierto? Siempre y cuando mantener pues las estrategias con objetivos que ya están establecidas, siempre que se están analizando los riesgos que las compañías manejan al hacer cambios, al hacer negociaciones, donde se adoptan mentalidades contradictorias o un enfoque de una transacción, de una contratación. Entonces, pues el documento sí habla como en sí de la historia de algunas empresas como FEDES, como algunas islas de pues, la administración de las islas del sur y entonces estos personajes pues muestran una perspectiva de lo que se comparte en las empresas, los comportamientos en la estrategia de las empresas. Es bastante pues interesante este documento y un buen ejercicio de la lengua extranjera. Buenas noches, muchas gracias.